Welcome to Edible Ethics, a new podcast brought to you by me, Jason, and
me, Stephanie.
Thank you very much for joining us as we get good and high.
In this episode, we're going to talk about the ethics of weight. Or is it the ethics of obesity? Did we decide?
I would say let's be atheoretical about it and as neutral as possible and say the ethics of weight.
Ethics of body weight.
Yes.
Before we get to that, though, we got some feedback about last episode that we didn't sound high enough. Or that we didn't sound high. I was high.
I mean, I must have been high.
You must have been high. I saw you take stuff all the way through the podcast. So if you weren't high when we started, you were high.
At one point, Stephanie cut me off when I was
That's
trying
right.
to vape because apparently I'd done it a dozen times already. But you know what? I did not feel particularly high until we mixed it with a little alcohol later in the evening.
Oh, interesting. So this time I went with a stevia mix.
Sativa?
Sativa. There you go. I can never get the name
Stevia
of the two brands.
just meant it was sugar-free.
We talked about last episode what both of our preferences in terms of gummies are, and it was a blend of sativa. What is it?
Sativa and indica.
And indica. But I thought that maybe just going all together with sativa might make me more obviously high.
See, that's very interesting because there are two ways to appear high, I think. One of them is to be like supremely focused, and the other is what I'm currently exhibiting.
So you're more the indica.
Oh, yes.
The body high.
The body high. And I always remember the difference between sativa and indica because indica implies in the couch.
That's right.
Which is where you're going to want to spend your day if you get a good indica high. So, and then the other one's sativa, so it doesn't matter what that one reminds me of.
Oh, so that's that might be interesting going forward is to do different strains.
Agreed.
And see how that goes. And also, so I took sativa and I took 5 milligrams, which you described as last episode as my sweet spot, but really it's almost my max, I think.
My gosh.
Yeah, my cheap date.
Very. I started with 2 10 milligram Smokies with a Z or a Z for wherever you're listening from. Smokies edibles. Cannabis-infused green apple fruit chews. So I started with 20 milligrams, and then I hit the pen about 6 times, and that's also a hybrid strain. So I'm all hybrid today, sativa and indica. The sativa is what enables me to speak clearly, and the indica is what enables me to speak freely.
Right. That's the theory anyway. We'll just do the disclaimer that we did last time, that we are both getting high legally. We are both of the age and in jurisdictions in which recreational marijuana is completely legal. In terms of whether we're getting high ethically, you would have to refer to episode 1 of this podcast.
So the Edible Ethics podcast, I recreate it in my mind every couple of days, but this Edible Ethics podcast is an opportunity for a couple of friends to enjoy or indulge in, depending on whether you're bringing a value judgment into play here, but enjoy or indulge in the delights of cannabis as an enabler for even franker and freer conversations than the ones we already have about the kind of ethical landscape before us and maybe what we can do as necessary to reshape it.
And the landscape we're going to be exploring today is the ethics of body weight.
Exactly. So this was a topic that has come up, or this is a topic that has come up a number of times in conversations between the two of us over the years.
And also a number of times in your scholarship as a philosopher of science and biology and ethics.
Exactly. And so the fact that it shows up in my own scholarship is something that Stephanie observed and then took as an invitation to explore some of these issues further. And so what you're going to hear us do today is poke around in this morass of the contemporary body weight discourse, at least in North America. We're going to poke around in there and then draw out some ethical lessons or perhaps ethical opportunities that ought to be pursued.
Yeah, I like ethical opportunities. I don't want to learn. I don't want to learn no lessons today.
No, I'm with you.
All right. And we use ethics and morality kind of interchangeably. Wouldn't you agree?
We do. Absolutely. It just makes for a much easier way to talk about these issues without getting into the nitty gritty distinctions that, may be logically necessary at some minute level, but really hinder discourse.
Yeah, right. They hinder discourse. They make it more difficult to talk about these things. How about that?
Exactly. Well put. See, you're not very high.
People are going to think you're high if you're saying things like hindering discourse.
Okay, I gotta hit the pen again.
Maybe hit the pen one more time.
Where did you go, pen? I found the pen. I tucked it onto my chest for safekeeping.
Nice. Meaning making a technical distinction between the words and concepts around ethics and around morality, we don't think is worth our time. So we're just going to use them interchangeably. And one of the reasons that I find body weight an interesting kind of ethical issue is that we cannot seem to, as a culture, get around using moral language when talking about this phenomena.
Absolutely. This is an entirely, as philosophers say, value laden discussion.
Even with kind of mountains of evidence, there seems to be, yes, this deep seated inclination or need to moralize body weight.
And, it's certainly possible that this is a universal phenomenon, but it's also possible that it's not. And I would love some feedback from our listeners about whether this connection between weight and morality is non existent in other cultural settings.
So it often, though, gets disguised, of course,
As health advice.
as health advice, and that we're talking about people's health, which we are. I mean, there's a health component to this, rather than their moral lives.
Yeah. So this connection between weight and morality is almost automatic in at least North American contexts. And yet there's no good reason to connect those two.
There seems to be a number of good reasons not to. So, and when we're talking about statements about why can't these people just lose the weight, it's a matter of individual choice, it's a lack of will. Although it goes even deeper than that, in terms of the moral force behind those statements seem designed to shame people. There's something wrong with you. Your body weight is shameful in that it indicates something is wrong with you as a person.
Yeah, it's exactly the signal.
And so one of the ways that people try to combat that moral judgment is to tie body weight to genetics.
So the claim there would be, if you're going to blame anybody, blame his genes for his body weight.
And there certainly seems to be a genetic component. True.
Genetic component to just about everything.
That's right. I guess that's part of the problem is everything's connected to genetics. So in some ways it offers no explanation that we didn't have before.
In general, yes, that seems to be the case, although with some lucky exceptions.
So do you want to challenge the idea that genetics is the most important factor of body weight?
I do want to challenge that idea. So this idea that we ought to disconnect morality from weight because weight is genetically determined is a failure on many fronts. Just about nothing is actually genetically determined. at the very least, we're going to be talking about epigenetic determination. And even determination is probably too strong a word there. The point is that there is a genetic factor in weight, as there is in just about everything else, is fair enough. But that's a far cry from genetically determined. And so, factually, this idea that we ought to focus on genes rather than on behavior is a non-starter.
So factually, it's a non-starter, but it also, I think, perhaps fails morally as well, because it seems to inevitably imply that if it isn't connected to the genes, then it is in fact the person's fault.
Absolutely. It's got that, the sort of dark flip side of it. And I should point out that one of my earliest papers that I published focused on the responsibility of certain kinds of professionals or experts in the modern landscape of the professions. And I came down pretty hard on folks who want to provide a genetic explanation for everything as effectively not being truth tellers.
So it leads people down pathways that are not effective. Making it a genetic medical condition has not made any contribution to resolving the issue of increasing body weight.
Right.
Neither on individual levels or on population levels. It leads people down false pathways, and then it also sets up this dichotomy that if something's genetic or medicalized, then it's not your fault. But if it exists outside a genetic or medical context, then it is somehow your fault. That's the
Right.
only two options. So it doesn't make sense that it's the genes for the reasons that you're saying. And also, this is pretty recently that body weight has surfaced as a global concern, and our genes don't change that quickly. So
Exactly.
and similarly, if you're trying to make it the problem of an individual, that individuals are lazy, lack willpower, again, does it make sense that it's only in the last 100 years that millions of people are born lazy and lacking of willpower? Like everyone that came before us were just like better than us.
Right.
So it makes no sense as an individual choice either.
That's exactly right.
So what we should be looking at is what has changed in the last 50, 100 years in a global way. If it's not our genes and if it's not our individual personalities.
There are some pretty obvious things that have changed. One of them is the massive global increase in carbohydrate consumption, in particular, simple carbohydrates, those that are of least nutritious value.
So where I'm sitting right now, in the place that I'm currently living for a few months, I'm literally right
She's on
across.
the run, folks.
That's right. I'm literally right across the street from the best dip cone I've ever had in my life.
You mean like a soft serve cone or
Soft
a ice
serve.
cream
Yep, soft serve
dipped
dipped
in
in
chocolate,
chocolate.
like Dairy Queen has?
Like Dairy Queen used to have. So, one reason I love it, I think, because reminds me of the Dairy Queen of my youth. And then also, I just love that style. It's one of my favorite cones, one of my favorite desserts. This is the best I've ever had. It's really good ice cream, and then it's got actual chocolate, like real dark chocolate. It's
Oh,
the place is actually a chocolatier.
oh my gosh. So it is not like Dairy Queen at all.
It's not. It's like cheese and artificial cheese sort of thing. It's so good.
Oh my gosh.
The idea that I can walk out of my apartment and
Into an elevator.
into an elevator 20 steps across the street and I can have this incredibly pleasurable, delicious experience. It's crazy. It's insane.
Not just
And
on an evolutionary time scale, but on a cultural time
yeah,
scale, given
right.
just how much change has happened over the last 100 years, as even compared to over the last 1,000 years.
So yeah, if you're talking evolutionary time frame, I mean, think about our hunter gatherers
Right, exactly. We're not
to have
talking
any
about.
kind of pleasurable food experience, and they wanted it, right? I mean, that's why they survived. You
Hmm.
have to, go out and stalk an antelope, and this would only happen, I don't know how many times. And again, I can make this happen every day. I can have one of the best food and eating experiences that that's been available to humankind.
I do believe that this conversation has partially inspired the munchies over there in my friend who might want to have one of those delicious dark chocolate dipped cones.
This is an aside. Do you get the munchies with when you're high?
I do. That's when I order from Uber Eats.
I don't get the munchies, so I don't feel hungry. I don't know if that's what you're feeling.
It is, or it's a sense of hunger.
I crave a taste experience.
Oh,
I mean, I have all this, heightened sense, and
right, right, right.
all my senses are heightened.
And
It
the only one that's really being let down is your taste buds because there's still that lingering taste of the cannabis, which is an unpleasant aftertaste.
Well, I have a gummy. Apparently it's loaded with sugar. I looked this time. It's terrible.
Oh, I know, mine are too. I have to like think about my insulin in regard to these things.
And it's almost everything tastes better. So, I mean, I'm having a glass of ice water. It tastes so good. Everything's the best I've ever tasted.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I remember making frying some chickpeas once in oil and some spices. When I was high eating them, I was thinking, "Oh my god, these are the best fucking chickpeas I've ever had in my whole life. I could spend the rest of my life just eating these chickpeas." So it's not just exclusively I crave bad stuff.
No,
Everything I eat tastes
everything.
so good. So not only have we made all these, just go back to this ice cream across the street.
Right.
Not only we've made a certain type of pleasure, for instance, eating pleasure, we've made it
Hmm.
so much more easier to access and heightened the taste pleasure portion of the experience and very often degraded the like nutritional value of that experience. So we've made all these pleasures super available. And then we've also made other pleasures less available. So just things like the pleasure of human connection.
Right. The pleasure of being able to walk safely in one's neighborhood.
Yeah, that's a good one. The pleasure of making a dinner from local foods and sitting down with your family and eating it.
Those are two separate things that, when connected, are compounded.
But we've made those parts of the taste experience, the eating experience, those pleasures less accessible. And we've made these kind of crasser versions of it, these really good ice cream cones that taste really
Right.
good, but they don't do anything for me socially, and they don't do anything for me emotionally, and they don't do any most importantly, they don't do anything for me nutritionally. In fact, they act against me nutritionally.
But dark chocolate, antioxidants, I mean, you're protected there.
Oh, yeah, that's true. It's basically a health food.
Oh, and don't forget, a woman of your age needs as much calcium in her diet
Yeah,
as
yeah.
possible. No?
Sold and
That's true,
sold.
actually, of a woman of any age. And men, too.
So if I'm deprived of all these other pleasures, that actually enrich my body and enrich my mind, then I'm gonna go for the ice cream cone.
And I'm going to go for fast food delivered by Uber Eats.
Like, those are rational decisions.
What I would like to do is follow some advice you've given me many times before and make it the case that I disconnect my credit cards from Uber Eats so that I have to enter all the information every time. And that might be a challenge when high. So that would be a net good thing for me.
It was just so funny that right, so what we would do is we would blame you. You're making the individual decision to get Uber Eats, and presumably you're not getting a salad.
I
Yeah.
often get a salad,
Sure.
but that's just to eat first.
So you're making the individual decision. Is all you need to do is to not make that decision. But there's literally like a global economy. There are thousands of people working every day to try to get you to make that decision, to try to get you to eat that burger delivered right to your house cheaply and easily.
Right.
Like this whole huge structure is trying to pressure you into doing that. And then
Yep.
when you do it, they're like, "Oh, you're just weak.
Exactly.
You don't
Exactly.
deserve healthcare or jobs or love because you're now surprised you're overweight.
You don't deserve compassion. You don't deserve kindness. You don't deserve anything.
Even though all you did was do what a huge economic system that involves millions of people is trying to get you to do.
And on top of an inherited, when very early in life, implanted metabolic system that has been almost, as it were, programmed to have you sense scarcity at all times, so that when you're in conditions of abundance, you're still approaching every commodity as if it's scarce.
Because that was a good strategy.
It really was. It was, in fact, the strategy that helped you survive
for millions of years of human history and development. That was the strategy.
Yep.
So anyone who's overweight is pursuing the correct strategy.
Mm-hmm.
If they were at any other point in human history.
100%.
They're the smart ones. They're the good ones. Their bodies are doing what makes sense to do.
Yep.
So, but something's going on that's not good for us. No question. I don't think, well, you can tell me if you disagree. I don't think it's just a matter of we need to accept body weight however it comes. What's your feeling about
I agree.
that? Why do you agree?
Because we're not committed to any kind of determinism that would have that as an outcome.
Oh, I see. Right.
What's your reasoning?
Well, I think also because I think there is something going on with our bodies that is not good for us either individually or on a population level.
Yeah.
Including global population level.
Perfect.
But I think what it is that, yeah, our bodies are just getting bombarded by our economic system, by our food systems, by our political systems, by our health systems. And we're just getting bombarded. It's a toxic mess.
And that gets under the skin, as it were, into the body, thanks to these developmental adaptations that you made in utero. I think I sound much higher this week.
I think I am higher, and I think I sound higher too.
Just for the sake of the audience, I've hit the pen 3 more times and had 1 more 10 milligram gummy.
Ooh, man. You can take a licking and keep on ticking.
Well, so far, I mean, the nice thing is I'm a man of a certain age and a certain size, and therefore I recently purchased a life-changing Lazy Boy reclining chair. I am currently perched in it, and so I always know that I can confirm the sort of lingering highness by trying to stand up. So that means that I don't try to stand up for a very long time. And I'm super comfortable in the chair. And so by the time I need to use the restroom, I'm sober enough to be able to do that.
Yeah. When in human history have we had access to the comforts of a Lazy Boy?
Really, just since the origins of the Lazy Boy company some decades ago.
It's decades.
I am 100%.
Decades.
This is not a paid advertisement.
No, that's right. We have no connection to Lazy Boy.
I am a first-time customer. I spoke to exactly 1 salesman. He was spectacular, and I purchased 1 chair, and it was one of the best transactions of my life.
Because it delivers a great deal of pleasure for comparatively not much effort.
Exactly.
We talked last episode in the ethics of weed episode about our cultures, not only ours, but certainly ours, fucked up relationship with pleasure and how we moralize the pursuit of pleasure. And I wonder if the obsession with body size and larger bodies has to do with the sense of them pursuing pleasure in a way that is seen as compromising themselves.
Almost in an obscene way. And so you can then link up 3 deadly sins: sloth with gluttony with lust.
Right. Yeah. An easy target, so to speak.
It's overdetermined, so to speak.
So how do we talk about then body size ethically?
It's a really good question. There is an increasing literature by primarily feminist scholars, women's and gender and sexuality studies scholars, as well as public health scholars, pushing for a kind of acceptance of human variation in body size as natural and normal, rather than as somehow disruptive or the cause of a moral panic.
I think we could combine that. So we could combine the sense of, on individual levels, understanding that body variation between people and even over the lifetime of one person is natural and normal.
Preach.
Natural and normal. It makes perfect sense with who we are as a species and where we've come from. We can combine that, though, with understanding that there is something atypical happening to our species at the population level.
Absolutely. And what are the causes of that? I mean, I hinted at one earlier by calling out the sort of global increase in consumption of relatively unhealthy carbohydrate sources as a contributing factor to the increase in weight trends we're seeing on more or less a global scale.
So this means not talking about individual choices as having any kind of effect on this global trend, but talking about body weight, and we'll say the O word, obesity, as something that happens to people rather than something that they're doing to themselves.
Right.
And that it's things like our economic systems, our food systems, the way we manage our environment, all of those things are having weight consequences on people. The people themselves are bearing the costs and the consequences of these terrible systems that we're setting up.
They're actually literally bearing the weight of
Right.
those systems.
So we usually end with describing what each of our major takeaways are, or what we think is kind of the ethical heart of the issue. What would be yours?
I think that, as I was intimating earlier, this idea of sort of engendering a kind of appreciation of bodily diversity and body variation, to think of that as something that's sort of natural and part of the human species rather than as something to be frowned at, condemned, or otherwise attacked. That goes some way forward in terms of talking about weight without implicating this kind of moralistic impulse. And I think it's also a really good idea when you're inclined to make a comment that has anything to do with body weight, just to think about how the various ways in which you could present that topic could have very different outcomes. And so being aware of the power of your words.
I'll build on that for my takeaway, big takeaway, or what I think people can be considering is how we can also talk about our own bodies ethically. What does that look like and what does that feel like, so that we're not kind of contributing to the moralizing of body weight by essentially shaming ourselves or treating ourselves as having done something wrong or immoral by failing to adhere to standard or normalized body weight mandates.
Right. Well, I can give you an example from just today. If I were to show you my, bank statement and try to explain to you why I made this purchase, now you'll see that it had a kind of moral vindication. Earlier today, I was having coffee with a friend and we were talking about body weight. And I mentioned to her that my current sort of repertoire of clothes is feeling snug in a way that's not comfortable. And so I decided that, rather than, as I would have done just about every moment of my life up until now, judging myself, instead I went online and found a good sale for pants I know that I have already in the size below, and I just bought the next size up. So when those arrive next week, I will have the luxury of feeling comfortable in what I'm wearing simply because I didn't moralize about what not fitting into my pants says about me.
Excellent. Ethical progress.
Yeah, 3 pairs of pants for $150. Nice pants. The kind of pants I can spill wine on and it won't stain.
Those are some nice pants.
Yeah. So, Stephanie, that was a really sort of very scratching the surface of a complicated topic conversation, but I think we really made some inroads, and I'm grateful for that. I'm feeling that I'm getting less high. How about you, Steph?
Really? After all your extra top ups?
Yep. But I don't have the munchies.
I'm still there. I'm
Lucky.
probably I might be getting too high to continue, in fact.
Well, then we should close this show down for this week.
Thank you for joining us as we got good and got high.
Until next time.
Bye.